Well, hello there, YouTube, and welcome to another public oil painting session. So today we are going to start a portrait. So it's been a while since we've done like a standard, just like head and shoulders portrait, and I decided we would go ahead and do that today. Hey, Stephanie Thompson. So if you look at the title, the word tutorial is in there. So please do not confuse this with a free lesson. It's a YouTube tutorial, much like the style of the videos that I used to do in the past, but in a live format. Hey, Canvas Dancer. One thing you're going to notice that's a little different this time is going to be the palette. So the palette shot here is just one complete shot at about 1080p, although it may not look 1080p to you. But the color should be a little bit better with this much detail. So I'm just going to be painting, going to the palette, and then we also have a close-up shot when we get into more close-up things later. So let's just get started. And what I'm going to do is use raw umber. I typically use raw umber for my drawing color. Sometimes I'll mix burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, but raw umber is a pretty good color to use to draw. I don't really use it for color, but just for drawing. So the photo reference is on the top left corner of your screen, and the model Lindsay, I painted her a couple months ago when she was posing for my Wednesday morning portrait group that I was running in Howard County, and I'm still running at the moment. But I did do a larger painting with the same reference in the past. I just don't really have too many new photo references recently, but I'll probably get some more, take some more references at some point in the future. So please feel free to ask any art-related questions during the duration of this demonstration, though it may be a little more difficult for me to answer the questions with the cameras. The addition of the camera setup. It's only really just two cameras. It's this one is the palette camera that you're used to, but I do have to switch buttons to get to it. And then this is actually the same camera, but it's a different zoom with my streaming software, so I'm trying that out. Just messing around with the settings. So with any portrait, you're gonna be faced with the problem, which is the big shapes in the beginning and the abstraction. As I always talk about, it's very important to see shapes and not so much a human head. Don't get confused with the terminology here. I'm going to be just referring to shapes. Eventually I'll talk about eyes, nose, and mouth and all that stuff, but at least for the beginning, just simple shapes. And it's up to you if you want to start it off like this with oil paint, drawing directly onto the canvas or panel. In this case, we're using a 12/16 panel. Up to you. That's 12/16 inches. If you want to draw it with pencil, the pencil is the more careful method of getting your outlines all figured out. The oil paint just allows you to transition into color and values faster. It's up to you. With my online students, I will typically start them off, especially with the first project. I start off online students with a drawing with pencil. So that's a good placement for the head. Now I'm going to go for some of the shapes. So let's see. First thing I'm going to lock into here is the top of the head. That's just a piece of paper towel. Top of the head, bottom of the chin. Make sure that's well established. And everything will be drawn into it. Her head is at a slight tilt, so you can see I've already kind of made a note of that with the shape of the head. Hey, Minnow. I'm using a size 2 filbert bristle brush, Silver brush brand. Links are in the description. I'm going to raise the forehead slightly. Now, since I intend to work on this for at least 3, maybe not more than 3, but at least 3 sessions, I'm going to draw a little bit more carefully, but I'm not going to do a very finished looking drawing. If this were a full composition, I probably wouldn't even get to the face. If there was an environment in the painting, I would work the big shapes of the environment and then get into the little minutiae. So with just a standard head and shoulders, the most complicated stuff involves the main triangle, meaning the 2 eyes and the nose connect the 3 dots, you get a triangle. Hey Mano, are you correct that you started an hour earlier? No, this is not a new time. This is still 7 my time. It's just we had daylight savings. So our clocks got set back an hour. So it is currently 7:25 p.m. for me. Hey Francisco. So the streams are still going to be Tuesday, Thursday, same time, 7:15 to 9. It's just daylight savings. And the umber sketch, these are just a bunch of guesstimations. It's going to be completely wrong at first. No one ever starts correct unless they're doing a tracing from the picture. And even then, it's not 100%. And I would be working the exact same if I was painting the model from life. No difference. And I'm going to try to attend some more portrait painting sessions so I can photograph other models. This is important, trying to get this main angle. So before I get any further, I must remind any viewers that may be new that this process of portrait painting, it really does take longer to make this look somewhat acceptable than a still life or a landscape. And that is because we're not used to seeing unfinished faces. I always mention this term, I call this the awkward stage. We haven't reached it yet, but we're going to. Once we have all the stuff, like the eyes, nose, and mouth, the head shape, things are going to be a little bit off, and it's going to be apparent to you. It's going to be very apparent to you because you're watching this on a screen, whereas to me, I'm looking at this in person and I'm standing back, and it's a different focal point for me. And I am standing back and forth. I usually like to go in more loose than tight. The more loose you are in the beginning, the more open you will be to changes. Other important things to look at are the distance between tear ducts. Sometimes it's just difficult to get this to look human as opposed to a cartoon. In the beginning it'll start looking kind of like a cartoon. Before it goes into the realm of human. Now the head is a little more square. So right now I have the ability to move stuff. Everything is very simplified. I can move anything. So this is the point where I need to be very open-minded. The big shapes are absolutely essential. Knowing how to work with the big shapes is sort of an art form of it in and of itself. So I'm unifying the shadows at the moment. So squinting down, and there's a shadow here that would be for the hair, and then a form shadow for the face. I'm just ignoring the distinction between the two. I'm using a little bit of solvent, which is in my little cup here. This is just Gamsol to thin out the paint. Again, that's just raw umber. And what's important in the big shape, in the big shapes part of this, is light and shadow. Make sure light and shadow is as clean and clear as it can possibly be, even if everything's in the wrong place. Hey Minnow, I'm using raw umber. I may have said burnt sienna by accident, but raw umber. Squinting down, I see that I'm approaching the head shape that I want. Let's test out our close-up camera shot. That works pretty well. Well, thanks for pointing out the daylight savings. Totally didn't think about that. I thought daylight savings was last week. I don't even know. I use my phone to keep track of time for me. So right now I'm just guesstimating where the mouth is going to fit through these little midtones. Yes, it's going to look mortifying. Like I said, this does reach an awkward stage. inexperienced viewers may look at the image and say that the nose is wrong, the eye is in the wrong angle, the mouth is not there, and that's just obviously going to be true because this is just beginning. And even then, it's never going to be 100% because we're not human photocopiers. Hey Rose, yep, these are oil paints. And no, this method cannot be done with acrylic because acrylic would dry, in case anyone is wondering. If you're using acrylic, you're going to have to draw it with pencil and then carefully put in a little wash of shadow. Or not, there's other ways to do it. Okay, so what I'm more focused on right now is the shape of the head, just shape of the head, and the shadow shape of the nose, the position of it. Because the head is close to centered, if not almost perfectly centered, this is one of the most annoying angles in all of portrait painting. This face is 3/4, slightly 3/4, but almost centered. One of the most annoying angles to have a model be positioned in relative to you. So I have to be very meticulous with the nose relative to this. If not, it's going to look like the nose is tilted slightly. Which can be the case. I mean, no one is 100% symmetrical. Now remember, you're watching this in 100% real time. So there's no edits here. I'm not going to fast forward it on you. You're going to see this develop as it does, naturally. Very slow, meticulous, yet still loose. AZ Han, oh, thank you. It was very kind of you. This part of any painting for me, especially live, is the most stressful at the starts. And little things like that, for me, would have been a huge mistake to try to focus on. This light shape here, though it is important, is unnecessary right now. What is important, as I said, is this outside shape relative to the nose. And I could work on that all day if I wanted to. Of course, I wouldn't really do that, but it's possible. But I just don't have the patience for it. Now, in some art schools, some ateliers, atelier is the name attributed to a classical art school, they can spend weeks on a drawing, just light and shadow drawing, before getting into shadows. Just linear drawing, I meant to say. Just light and shadow linear drawing. So they would just draw, instead of a value for the shadow, they would draw a line having the perimeter of the shadow. Okay, so now I'm honing in on the position of the tear ducts relative to each other. There are some folks that would rather move a mountain than move an eye. Now is the time to move eyes. I usually will call these stand-in features because they're standing in place for the true features. They're going to help us figure out where the true features are eventually going to fit. but we're not going to find that out until we make enough mistakes. Same thing applies to everything else. Whether I'm painting a pumpkin, I'm painting a landscape with a mountain, whether I'm painting a model, a full figure model in the sunlight, whether I'm painting a trash can in the middle of an afternoon. It's all the same. Fundamentals are the same, no matter what the subject matter. Okay, so now I will stand back, and as I stand back, I can stand you back by changing the camera angle. So, as I stand back, the shape of the head is pretty close. It's not going to be perfect. This is annoying me, this line, so I'll try to minimize that. It's getting there. Hey, scene. Yep, my hair has been getting longer. And yes, these are oil paints. Rose. Alright, standing back again. Okay, so as I stand back, another thing to mention is that you are positioned at a slight angle relative to this. So the more angles I put in here, the more it's going to look distorted to you. Although one thing is this shape. Now there's some viewers that have criticized me for saying all I do is say that I'm moving this a little to the left or a little to the right, which is a silly argument, because if you're complaining about me saying that I'm moving something a little to the left or a little to the right, adjusting this a little there, adjusting this a little in some other place, you're basically complaining about all of art, all of oil painting, because this is all about a series of adjustments, a series of changes. And if your aim is to get everything correctly placed all at once, then you're probably doing the wrong thing. You probably should take something else up instead of art, because art is hard. It's not going to be something that just happens. We're not going to just happen across the right shapes perfectly every time, which is why we're talking about big shapes today. Oh, it's pronounced Sean, my bad. I'm trying to read from my computer screen. Thank you. Yeah, no problem. I'm glad that you like the videos. Hey, Kane, man. Thank you. You're too kind. So I'll make a move, stand back. Right now I'm standing probably 5 feet, if not 7 feet away, making sure all the big angles are correct, or relatively correct. Hey, Lisette. Oh, thank you. Okay, so now that I've adjusted this shape needs to be adjusted. And like I said, it's all a series of adjustments. And I'm not going to do too much for this umber drawing. I just want to get everything positioned properly, and then I'll start to make decisions in color. And I'm going to have to work very thin so that this will be dry enough for me to work next time we return here, which will be Thursday. Hey, Sean, have you or will you do any abstract stuff? Maybe like in a background of a painting, but I would always try to paint something representational. That's just my personal preference, I guess. I mean, nothing wrong with abstract. Hey, Rose, where am I? Well, I can't say exactly where I'm located on YouTube, but I can say what state I'm in. I'm in Maryland, USA. A little bit of drawing for the ear. Hey, Minnow. The angles they do make such a difference. Oh yeah, there's tons of distortion. And like I said, I painted this model from life in the same pose, so as I'm looking at this, I can see the distortions on this head shape. I can see the distortions even in the ear. I can see the distortions on the jaw. So if you can paint models from life, always do that. Use the reference as a last resort. I think that should be good for the placement of everything. The rest is going to be figured out with color. Now I conveniently started, excuse me, I conveniently start with a gray, a neutral gray, because skin tones typically tend to be warm, no matter what the skin tone is, they tend to be warm. So having a warm color overlapping over a cool color like the gray, neutral gray background really does help. And you'll see that in a minute. So we're going to transition to the palette. Hopefully you'll be able to see some of the mixtures a little better. And we're going to start off with just a base skin tone. So just something to draw with. And this is burnt sienna. Almost the same color as the palette. Burnt sienna, Viridian. I'm creating a nice warm brown, something I can draw with. I'm using plenty of paint to do it. I switched to another brush. You can see the other one's just sitting over there. Using plenty of white. This is lead white. I'm keeping the mixture very simple. It's just two colors in white. Now I'm going to adjust this color as I go. Okay, so that's my first little guesstimation. So after putting a mark down, as you can see, it's a tad bit too warm. So I'll cool it off with a blue. I'm not going to cool it off with Viridian anymore because green has a little bit of yellow in it. So I'm using Cerulean Blue. And again, there's a ton of paint on this brush. See that? And that's not too big of a difference. Not too big of a difference. So we need to go back, try something else. Ultramarine blue. And you could get these colors with the Zorn palette. You don't have to have an 18 color palette like I do for skin tones. I have this color palette set up for any situation. Absolutely any situation. I can be working on a landscape the same day as a still life and the same day as a portrait painting. Same palette, same colors, same deal. Okay, so that one is much more believable. So I will stick with this one to draw and to move things around with, and not the other ones. So what I'll do is just get some gloves on and just take off the paint that I don't need. Since I use lead white, anytime I come into close contact with the paint like this, I will wear gloves. Alright, so now what is left to do is figure out the light and shadow shapes. And I like to use values really early on to help me figure out where things are placed. And I'm going to use the dark of the raw umber here. See this? This is going to be my hairline. This is going to be the boundary where the forehead ends and the hairline begins. Another way you could have started this was with a monochromatic grisaille, which is most of the time how I have my students start, is with a grisaille. Hey Sean, yes, I have used limited palettes before, and I start off my students using limited palettes and then build them up towards a more extended palette. Now as you can see, I'm just using the same color that I mixed up, but I can make it a little lighter and adjust it however I want. So this palette is set up through a color wheel. So the reds are here, the yellows, the greens, the blues, and then the violet. So I can just mix whatever the heck I want. If I want it to be green, green it is. If I want it to be more yellow, it's going to be more yellow. And it's kind of like a piano in the sense, like you can play the keys on a piano. You don't have to, sometimes you don't have to look, right? I don't play the piano, so I don't really know if this is true. But I assume that there's muscle memory involved with how you play a piano. So it's the same thing with the palette. I instinctually know where green colors are, different types of green colors on my palette. I know where different yellow colors are, different types of reds. I can adjust it however I want. Yep, no problem, Sean. Okay, so every time there's a value change, that should be indicating a plane change. So right here is a plane change. Now I'm going to use some lead tin yellow, a little more cerulean blue, maybe a tad bit of cobalt blue. I'm actually going to get some gloves and get rid of the raw umber. I used most of it anyway. I only put a tad bit, as much as I need, and then I take it off the palette. It is not a good color to use to mix colors. You can use it if you want to mix, but I don't, because raw umber is it's really a weak color that's only useful for drawing for me. As you can see, all these colors, which are typed in the description box for you, are very prismatic, so I have to neutralize them by cross-complementary mixing. I can't just go for an earth color. I'd have to make the earth color. And yes, this is wood, so the color that you're seeing here is going to look different than what you're seeing here, because this is not wood, this is gray. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do is continue to draw in these planes for the forehead. And like I said, this is the beginning stage of a portrait. Everything's going to be all over the place. So once again, any new viewers that might be there, please do not remind me that the eyes and the nose and whatever is in the wrong place. I'm well aware of that. That's how the painting starts. Things are all over the place. And this is how we develop a painting, however we want. I welcome all art questions. If you have questions about materials, if you have a question about subject matter, anything art related, I welcome these questions. A question from Menno. If the portrait turns out, let's see, so if the portrait turns out great as a painting but does not look like the actual model, are you disappointed or satisfied? I'm always satisfied. I mean, I'm happy to just be able to paint, to be honest. I'm not that picky about likeness. Some people can be more picky about likeness than others. Hi, Hamed. I am not as picky about likeness. Though I strive to get the likeness, I'm just not as picky about it. And if anyone's interested in or what kind of artworks I make, my own artworks, my studio paintings, please check out my Instagram. Hey, Ronald Miller. So I'm already starting to put some color changes in here, and I'm going to build onto those. So as you can see, the highlights are even different colors now. I like to go between Cerulean Blue and Cobalt Blue to change that. Okay, in Maine. So portraits from the 1800s. You know, I've wondered that myself about the likeness. One way you can kind of figure out if someone was sticking true to the likeness or not is if they painted the same subject multiple times, or they could just get the subject's likeness wrong multiple times and we just think that's how they look. Like Velasquez painted some of the same people several times. Rembrandt painted himself several different times. So we've got to assume that Rembrandt did capture his own likeness. You can tell it's the same person. He painted himself in his 20s, his 30s, and all the way up to the end of his life in his 60s. Hey Hamed, you have a big problem with overpainting. That I consider the term overpainting, or if we're talking about the same thing, if you're worried about painting too much, putting too much time into a painting, some people call it overpainting, other people call it overworking. If that's what you're talking about, I don't believe that that term is accurate. I don't think there's such a thing as overworking a painting. You really can work on a painting as much as you can tolerate to work on that painting, but you shouldn't feel like you're going to ruin it by working on it more. You will always make the painting better and better the more you learn. And I've got some paintings I put aside for like a month at a time, and then I return to it with a fresh eye. I'm building the portrait now from the inside out. Not so much about the outer contours anymore, but more from the shapes within. And I'm going to work on this many different times, so at least three. Okay, so now we're going to get a different brush, and I'm going to mix up some middle values. So same brand, same type of brush. Now I'm going to have 3 of them out. So this one's going to be for some middle values. I'm going to use Alizarin permanent, Viridian, white. Know your tendencies. I have a tendency to make colors too warm, so it's important to know what your tendencies are. The best way to know what your tendencies are is to have a good teacher point them out to you, or eventually, after a lot of time, you'll notice it on your own. Oh, we've got a super chat. Thank you so much, Joan. Thank you. Alright, super chat Grumpy Cat is going to show up now. Thank you so much. Super chat Grumpy Cat says thank you. Thank you so much, Joan, for the super chat. It helps me out so much. Super chat Grumpy Cat is here with the palette. Super chat Grumpy Cat is here. So thank you so much. That helps me so much. Thank you. Very kind of you, Joan. Thank you. I'm going to go into the value for the eye socket, and it is a little more pink. So I'm going with the Alizarin permanent, yellow ochre. pulling it off a little bit. So every time you are developing a painting, you're always going to have different strategies that you can apply. Typically, the safest strategy is to focus on light and shadow. Light and shadow is absolutely the most critical. So even if I don't get the color to be as close, as long as I can get the light and shadow shapes to be reasonably accurate, I will be in a better position for next time. But that doesn't mean that that's always the case. Sometimes it is a good idea to get the color going, the big shapes of color, and then you can build the details in later. So there's all kinds of different strategies. Hey Francisco. And one thing I'm well aware of right now is the orientation of the eyes is going to be very cumbersome. It's going to take a lot of work, just like Francisco said. It's hard work. So what I'm going to do is work around the eyes. And then I'll go and add more details for the eyes later. So now we're going to get a little more pink. I typically just mix onto my old puddles like this. Alright. I'm pretty sure that that's spam, so I'm going to have to take this person out or not. I don't know actually. Is this spam or not? I'm not sure. If that wasn't spam, I apologize. What I'm trying to avoid right now is putting in lots of details for the eyes and then ignoring the structure around the eyes. Use a tiny bit of cadmium red. That color always dries so fast. Hey Rafa, that was a save from Brazil. Exactly, so I didn't punish the viewer. I just used the timeout to see if someone would say something. So I apologize. I think I got that one wrong. Hey Emin, how can I determine the color like this? So my training with portraiture is life painting, painting from life. So in my training, what I was taught was that you must paint colors in relation to one another, never in isolation. So when you're working from a photo reference, be very wary of the tendency to copy the photograph. Do not put, I mean, unless you want to, but do not put the color into Photoshop or into an app of some sort, like Photoscape, which is the one I like to use for cropping pictures and thumbnails and stuff. But try to avoid using visual aids, like, for example, your phone has an app that can look at a pixel and tell you the color code of that pixel. That is absolutely not what you want to do if you're trying to oil paint colors in relation to one another. The only way to really learn how to paint colors in relation to one another is to study color in outside of a commissioned portrait or outside of a family portrait kind of setting. Paint someone you don't know, someone that, you know, it doesn't matter if you get the likeness or not, and paint shapes of color in relation to one another. So for example, this one is, for starters, darker than this one, but it is also closer to the violety red. So I'm painting it that way. And I'm working with the superstructures, meaning the structures of the nose, the planes of the nose, not so much the details of the nose. But we'll get to that at some point. Probably not tonight, but at some point. Hey Rafa, thank you. So I can just use the same brush without really thinking too much about what color I'm mixing, and just place down shapes of color. So for example, if that one was too warm, just make it cooler. But try not to diagnose a color. It's not as complicated as you might think. It gets more simple, or lack of better terminology, it becomes much more manageable when you feel out the color more. You feel a blue, you feel a red. This sounds weird when I say it, but you feel an orange, you feel a violet, and you just paint through a feeling. And it's a lot of fun to paint that way. It's less restricting. So for the eye, I'm just gonna blur it out now. Very thin paint, so I don't need to worry about the detail. Hey, Emin. So hopefully I can get that point across in this, we're calling this portrait painting tutorial, focusing on big shapes. Big shapes of color. Feel the color. Let the color become intuitive. I don't think violet anymore. It's just a color that's, I feel like it needs to be painted in there. The less you have to stress yourself out over getting it right, the more fun you have. The more fun you have while you're painting, the more you will get it right. Because you're enjoying it. When you enjoy it, you'll do it better. I'm guessing that can apply to almost anything in life. Amen. Thank you. Okay, so now that we're getting more complicated with the colors, I won't be switching to the palette camera as frequently. Right now I'm looking at, for example, a highlight on the side of the tear duct. It's more blue, so I'm going to go with Cobalt Blue. It's the perfect in the middle blue. Now you can really see how aesthetically appealing my palette is. This is my favorite palette of all time. I have not used a single other palette since October. This palette's birthday is October 25th. That's when I got this palette. And I haven't used anything to mix paint on other than this palette. So here's the light I was looking for in the tear duct. Now paint as thin yet lean as you possibly can in the beginning if you want to work on your painting in a couple days time. Today's Tuesday. I'm going to want to work on this painting again on Thursday. And hopefully you'll be here with me on Thursday. Remember, I'm doing these streams Tuesdays and Thursdays. If you're ever curious about how I clean this brush, my fan brush, this is how I do it. I just use dry paper towel and just run it across. Oh, we got another super chat. Oh, thank you so much. Hey, Blue Sky. Welcome, welcome, Blue Sky. Remember, I will be here Tuesdays and Thursdays between 7:15 p.m. and 9 p.m. Thank you so much, Stephanie Thompson. Here we go. Super chat, Grumpy Cat. Super chat, Grumpy Cat. Thank you so much. Super chat, Grumpy Cat says, thank you, thank you, thank you for the super chat. We're gonna say thank you for the super chats with the close-up. With this view, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And with the palette view, thank you, thank you, thank you so much for your super chat, Stephanie Thompson. Wow, this really made my week. Thank you so much. Question from Billy: did you do bark drawings when learning to paint and draw? Yes. Yes, I did bark drawings. And I made my own version of the bark drawings for my students. I call them drawing templates. So I made drawing templates with different stages, focused on portraiture. I highly encourage anyone to look at the bark drawings and try to do the bark drawing exercises, which is essentially this. It's just trying to get light and shadow in as correct a position as possible. Let's go back to the palette, and once again, you will be able to feel a color. So for me, I'm thinking of a shape, I saw it, I blinked my eye, I remember it visually, and now I'm interpreting it and just mixing it. I'm moving the brush in this direction to try to minimize glare. The nose in a position like this is even more important to get than the eyes. That's weird to say, and in the past I probably would have said just go for the eyes, but after so much experience painting, with a pose like this, get the nose positioned correctly. If you can get the nose positioned correctly, everything else will follow. I'm digging into the paint here because cadmium red, there it is. Cadmium red tends to dry so quickly. And in the first layer, when you're painting like this kind of style of painting, which is a little bit more loose, more freeing, you can really layer it however you want. If this was to be a very technical academic painting, I would go with lighter values. But since this is a start of a tutorial specifically about how I paint portraits. I'm telling you, I just paint whatever I feel. And it sounds weird to say it. I don't want to sound like I'm arrogant or something. It's really the opposite. I'm just trying to show you that you can get to a point in painting where you're not even worried about painting. It's so odd. It's just something that you think it out, you feel it out, and then it just happens. And what you want to do is always reason with the shapes. Don't fight the shapes. And this is how I draw with color. Because that's essentially what we're doing. We're drawing just like you would with a pencil. Some people ask me, do you ever draw? And I tell them I draw all the time. I just draw with color. Hey Blue Sky, did you mix any oil with the paint? Oh, don't worry about it. If you're new to oil painting, again, feel free to ask anything. This is a tutorial style video, so I welcome all art related questions. So I did not mix any oil or any medium, I should say. I didn't mix anything extra in the paint. All I put on there was this paint straight from the tube. So just straight from the tube onto these little blobs. So what I do is I keep the paint on the palette. This little strip of the palette, I leave the paint on there, and I put as much as I need. I put a ton, actually. I put more than I need, I should say. I put a lot of it. And every day when I'm done painting, I use safflower oil to clean the mixing space and paper towel, and that's it. And I put the palette in a box. So this is my Stay Wet palette and box. You can see some of the paint has gotten on the edges, but it's okay. This is an airtight seal box that I use to keep the paint as fresh as it can possibly be. Okay, so let's add a few more things before we start to guesstimate the eyes. And I might just play around with the idea of just leaving the eyes like that. Just to show you that you don't have to paint in any specific sequence. There's some painters that will draw the daylights out of the subject that they're working on. I mean, they will draw everything perfectly, and then they'll go in and render, basically almost finishing one shape at a time. And you can do that. Oil painting is a very freeing process. It's freeing in the sense that it's not going to dry on you. It's going to let you take your time. Hey, smiley faces. I'm using Ultramarine Blue, Alizarin, and Viridian. I start to guesstimate the position of the nose, the wing of the nose. Now when I want things to get cooler, I just automatically go to the greens and blues on my palette. Sometimes I don't even know which color I put on my brush. It can be that freeing. I'd say this is the part in the painting I think that everyone struggles with, including myself. Everyone will always struggle with the drawing, the very beginning. Some people will use a projector. Others will draw more carefully than this before going into color. And then others might do exactly what I'm doing. Whatever the sequence, whatever the method, whatever the materials that you're using, it's always about the fundamentals. And one thing I'm a little cautious of, a little weary of right now, is the length of the nose. So the nose is from the root of the nose, which is the plane break for the glabella, right here, to the bottom of the nose. If I need to move the nose, I can easily move it at this stage with color. I'll show you how. I'm just going to move it. I'm not even going to measure it. I feel like I have to move it, so I'll move it. I don't care what it looks like right now. It doesn't bother me. Detail is useless. It's pointless at this stage for me, in this early stage. So I'm just going to make the nostrils much bigger. I'm going to move this up to where I feel it needs to go. And as I do that, I'm going to put in a greenish brown for the cast shadow on the side of the nose. And if there was ever an awkward stage in this painting, this is it. Doesn't get any more awkward than this. Or it probably will. We'll see. Hey Hamed. Menno, are you using just one brush right now for darker colors? I have, well, I got them confused, but I've got a dark brush, a light brush, and a middle tone brush. So 3. But I've been confusing the middle tone brush with the light brush. Okay, so I'm looking at the angle of the nose very carefully on my reference. The angle is correct, I think. As correct as it's going to be for now. What was not correct though was the length. And if anything, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret, just between you and me. If anything, if you elongate a nose, it's actually safer to elongate a nose than to make it shorter. Aesthetically, it kind of works out anyway if you elongate it, but if you make it too short, you make the nose too short, that's going to stick out more to the viewer than elongating it slightly. Hey Fabian, thank you. You're so kind. This is definitely the part where I am the most self-conscious, I think, with any painting video. So thank you for your kind words. So I'm moving up the nose slightly. For example, if you've ever painted in an art group, meaning a painting session where there's other artists painting the same model with you, during the breaks it can be kind of weird. It can feel weird when people are walking around and seeing your unfinished painting. So that's just something that one has to understand. So if you ever feel that way, you're not alone. If you're afraid to show other people your artwork because of what they might think, just know that whatever they're going to say to you, I've heard worse about myself and my paintings, so don't worry. Alright, so now we're going to put in some light on the opposite side. Like I said, I'm not really thinking too heavily about what color I'm using. As you can see, I'm going for a value range and I just mix. I mean, you can see how chaotic this is. It is glaring a little bit, so it's kind of hard to see exactly what is what, but you can see almost all of these colors are the same value. So this is just more of an intuitive process. AK and main. Each artist is painting the model differently. Yep, that's another really fun thing to see. Different people's interpretations of the same thing. So for example, that just got really warm. So on the palette, I'll just go and contrast it with Ultramarine Blue. You don't have to think about what's the right color. Think about what are the surrounding colors and how does this color look in relation to those colors. And what's even more complicated is how do these shapes work in relation to the other shapes? And do they convey a sense of the human that you're observing? So with the eye, once again, I'm going to blur it and then we'll work into it next time. What matters is the shape. Now I've made this analogy before about the difficulty with portrait paintings. One of them is that an unfinished face is like a horror movie. A lot of times in a scary movie, you'll see, or even in your own nightmares, you'll probably see an unfinished face as an apparition. And that terrifies the daylights out of many people, including myself. So, learning to see this as a series of shapes of color instead of an unfinished face will help you out so much. And a lot of it's just psychological. If you can get over the fact that this is a human being, you will improve your painting dramatically. A lot of times, people that struggle with self-portraits struggle with differentiating a human being from anything else that they're painting. So if you struggle to do self-portraits because you don't like to look at yourself in the mirror, you are thinking of the painting too much as a human being instead of a representation of a human being. Okay, man, when you paint in the blue on the face, are you using the blue to dull down the flesh color you're applying? Yes, exactly. Good observation, great observation. I'm using blue to not just dull it, but gray it slightly. So for example, this one right here, this section right here, I'm going to gray it slightly. I'm using Cerulean Blue. Because you cannot have a face be the same color all throughout, unless you're doing a grisaille, which again is a safer way to build a painting. If I was being on the safe side, this would be a grisaille. If you're wondering what a grisaille is, it just means a monochromatic underpainting. Each plane change is indicated by a value change. See that? A jump from one value to the next. Although that was way too big of a jump and way too much paint. So I'm very carefully just whispering the paint on here. Now I'm starting to get a sense of the structure around the eye socket, the maxilla, and the nose. Can't forget about our trusty fan brush. Remember, I dry cleaned the thing. And then okay, so now I'm just going to work the surrounding structures. Go back to the palette. Using lead tin yellow, mixing right into whatever this is. Kind of grayish. I'll pink it out a little bit. A tad bit of alizarin. And color helps me see structure. It's a little weird, it's backwards. You're usually supposed to find structure and then add color to it. And that's the way that I teach. That's how I introduce these concepts to my students. However, when I paint, I use color to help me guide shapes. I mean, You've seen portraits made by Van Dyck. The eyes were piercing right through you, and that's a really good goal to try to have. Expression. And at this stage in the painting is just way too early. Try to capture expression. Oh, that's right. Oh, it's eyes that follow you from each angle. Usually if you center the eyes, so for example, if these eyes were centered and then you walk around, they will follow you. Actually, that might actually happen with this painting. We'll see. We'll look into that in the future though. Today we're just trying to get things placed. I'll move you to another close-up shot. I'm going to use my mid-tone brush. I'm just using the raw umber to just stand in place for my shadow shapes. Excuse me, my camera just got unplugged. Don't worry. I'm going to move you to the palette view for now while I fix my camera. That's what happens when you've got cables. Alright, so while you're here, that mid-tone that I was talking about, once again, this is how I'm working the painting from the inside out. Anyone that may be new to a YouTube channel, remember I'm doing these painting sessions every Tuesday and Thursday between 7:15 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we've still got about 19 minutes. Try to cover as much as possible. Hey Edward, oh, you thought your phone died. No, it wasn't your phone. It was me tripping on my camera cable. So the gray is helping to make the skin tones stand out, and the umber is standing in for the shadow. The details are being ignored. The details, the precise shape for the nostrils, the precise anything for the eyes, completely secondary. And you know why? It's because if we can get the superstructures, the surrounding big shapes, just like in any kind of construction process, if you get the big stuff, it's easier to fit the little things into it. But if you have, to the contrary, if you have the finished drawing already and you have placed in the proper shadows, you can go right in with details if you want. So I'm not going to tell you this is the only way to paint. This is just how I like to. So if you like these streams and you know any artists or art students that would like to watch them, please share them. Don't let me be your best kept secret on YouTube. So on the palette, I'm just getting something slightly blue. You see, I use cerulean a lot. There's a reason why cerulean blue is so darn expensive. It's such a great blue to use. It's like cobalt blue in a sense that it's a nice and true blue. It looks very, it's almost perfectly blue. It leans a little bit yellow, but it is definitely a bright blue. But it's weak. You can use it without tinting the color too much. Sometimes weak colors are more useful than strong ones. Now I've got to mix this tone again. And in the same place, same stuff. Something red with something blue or something green. Hey Barbara, welcome to the stream. Gotta say I'm very impressed with the painting that you sent for the virtual classroom this week. Excellent, excellent job. Definitely one of your best paintings. I'm glad that you're enjoying the streams. Now we're going to go and use the middle tone brush, and we're just going to guesstimate. Middle tone brush and guesstimate. Color for the lips. I'm going to use my reds that tend to dry faster, like cadmium red. See, I'm kind of drilling into the paint because the outer layer dries. A little bit of lead tin yellow, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And let's try it out. Hey Tipu, can't you use less normal blue instead of using less intense blue like cerulean? It depends on which blue you want to use. For example, the reason the Zorn palette works, the 4-color limited palette, is because ivory black, which is the color that you use, the dark color that you use for the Zorn palette, ivory black is actually a blue. So you can actually use any blue you want. I just like to use cerulean blue, and I just like to use the colors that I have. But in actuality, you can use any colors you want. As long as you relate shapes of color to one another, perfectly fine. Great question. Hey, Eamon. Oh, thank you. Thank you for your kind words. Yes, this is a live oil painting tutorial. Not to be confused with a free online lesson. I do offer personalized guidance for my online students on my Patreon. But with this, I hope to have a nice balance with my previous YouTube portrait painting tutorials and this live format. I hope so. I hope I'll be able to balance it. I specialize in portrait. I'm not gonna lie, I think I enjoy portrait more than anything else, painting wise. I enjoy painting people and environments as well, but there's something about the human face I've always been drawn to. Hey, Janice. Yes, correct. K in Maine, that is the Zorn palette. Edward Soto, speaking of lead tin yellow, how would you describe this color? Excellent question. How would I describe lead tin yellow? Lead tin yellow is kind of like a lemony yellow. There's two types of lead tin yellow you can get that I know of. There's the dark version and the light version. Depending on what brand you buy it from, say Rublev, type 2 I think is the light one, type 1 is the dark one, I forgot. Either way, they're both kind of lemony type yellows. They're light yellows, and you can see it right here. It's right next to my green, so that's my lead tin yellow. It's next to my green. It's also right next to my cadmium yellow pale, which leans a little bit more towards green anyway. And this is chrome yellow, which is a lead yellow, and it is more of a, I'd say, cadmium yellow than anything. But lead tin yellow, it is a greenish type yellow, not very high intensity, so it's not as bright as a cadmium. It has a tendency to dry faster, which is one of the reasons I like it. It's also very stringy, kind of like a silky feel to it, like lead white. So it's got kind of a stringiness to it that I like. It mixes quite well with anything. As you saw, I just used it there without thinking about it. It mixes really well. It's not a super high tinter. So overall, it's an excellent color to use for portraiture and anything. I like to use it to make gold. Not real gold, I wish I could, but I use it with Indian yellow to make a goldish color. So with the lips, I am just going to have shapes of light and dark. And if I have to move the lips later, I'll move it. So thanks for the question about lead tin yellow. Oh, another nice thing about lead tin yellow, if anyone doesn't know. The Girl with the Pearl Earring painting by Mr. Vermeer. That yellow on the headdress is lead tin yellow. That is lead tin yellow. The blue is lapis lazuli. So that's just a great thing to have if you have a palette, a color on your palette that was used by Vermeer. Kind of a nice thing. On a side note, I also have the color that Van Gogh used to eat, chrome yellow. So I really like this palette. There's a lot of historical significance to it. And if I was ultra classy, I wouldn't have cadmium red deep. I would have vermilion, which is a mercury red. But I'm not that classy. Though I wish I was. It's a very expensive red. It's the red that was used by the old masters, which can be kind of fugitive. But I just like historical colors. I like combining historical colors with modern colors. Like anytime I mix Dioxazine purple with lead tin yellow, you know what? Let's do that. Let's do that. Let's mix lead tin yellow with Dioxazine purple. You know that the complement of yellow is purple. So anytime you do that, you see that? It neutralizes. And it creates a really nice skin tone. It's bizarre. It's not what you would expect. But I love it. I really do enjoy combining classical with modern. And yes, the structure of the face is all over the place. Like none of this is at all close to being finished. Hey Stephanie, oh wow, you've seen the really old ones, the daily Yupari ones. Wow. Thank you for watching those. I'm surprised. So that series of videos probably was the most, I think, work, but the most fun. And I got the least amount of views. I had to switch it away from daily because it was destroying my YouTube channel. Let's see, I missed something. I missed 3 questions, I think. So Tipu, I like the red bell pepper last week. What will the subject for your next non-portrait live stream coming up on Thursday? Okay, I'm gonna stick with the portrait, I think, for Thursday. But my next non-portrait one will very likely be another still life. I'm thinking of setting up like a glass with a fluid in it. I actually did have a setup, I just didn't use it. I had my spike lavender and my linseed oil. I had 3 different glass jars. But I don't know, I kind of struggle with subject matter sometimes. Atipu, can you clarify, you will move the lips or will you make the lips move? I will move the lips if I have to. I could make them move, it's just the same thing, kind of like a riddle. Okay, so now that I have the lips locked in, I'll just put a few more shapes around the mouth, and then that'll take us all the way to 9. I'll just use the same brush that I did with the lips. Here's another thing for you. People say that if you don't, things that people say, well, mud is a term that people use, and I just used my red that was on the brush and just mixed right in the middle of the palette. There is no such thing as mud in a painting, and mud is a word that's used to describe kind of a poop looking color in a portrait, for lack of better words. And that doesn't exist. There's no such thing as say an ugly color. There's no such thing as an ugly color. There is only colors that are not related together properly. Did you get that? There's no such thing as an ugly color. That is no such thing as mixing mud on your palette. There is only colors that are not related together properly or related enough. Let's see, BKA 78. I varnish my painting, and how long to dry the painting before you varnish it. So you got two options. One is if you want to varnish your painting while it's touch dry, meaning you finished it in the past week or past couple weeks, you can varnish it with Gamvar varnish, Gamvar, Gamvar, made by Gamblin. That is a fully safe varnish to use, even if your painting hasn't been dry for 6 months. If you want to wait 6 months and use the traditional varnish, then you can opt for a Damar. Damar varnish has kind of a smell of turpentine. If you don't mind that, it's what was used historically. Now I have to be very careful with these planes. If I round this out too much, I'm going to make her look like she's in her teens. If I make this too sharp, I'm going to have the opposite effect. So this area is kind of delicate when it comes to things like age, as well as the cheekbone structure. But it's kind of funny, if you look at someone with a face mask from a distance, you can't even tell their age. For example, I was at a craft fair with my wife on last Saturday, and someone thought I was in high school. And then they looked at me closer and they're like, "Oh, you're old." And I was like, "Yeah, not really, but sure. I'm definitely not high school age." But anyway, if you cover this up from a distance, you can't even tell someone's age. Alright, so we're looking at 9:01 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So what I'm going to do is just with a flat value cover this. I want this to be dry for next time and have a color on it. And that should conclude the big shapes. I'm going to just let the ear be. I'll go into it next time. But yes, for the next non-portrait video, we're gonna do another still life. Okay, so we are going to let that dry. Remember, I did not use a ton of paint, so I didn't use a lot of impasto. No medium. So this should dry, be touch dry at least, by Thursday. It may be a little gooey in some places, but I'll still be able to work on it. Hey David. Oh, okay, yes, that's true. Yeah, but I'm not going to verbalize that. So that is it. I'm going to let that be. Itipu, will you be finishing this live stream? So I'm doing these live streams from 7:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we are now out of time for today. I will be doing these streams every Tuesday and Thursday. But please stay up to date with my YouTube channel because life happens. I mean, sometimes I may have something to do or a birthday or I don't know. For up to date, for any updates, please check out my YouTube channel, specifically the community section. I'm just, someone needs to take the brush away from me. Alright, brush it down, brush it down. And that's just big shapes, big shapes. Hey Blue Sky. Well, I'm happy you discovered my channel also. Thank you for joining. I hope you have a nice day too. Okay, here's where I'll ask if there's any last minute questions. So I'll hang out for just another couple minutes. Thank you, Kay and Maine. Thanks, Menno. Thanks, Canvas Dancer, Cassandra. Just gonna hang out and see if there's any last minute questions. Hey Tipu, yeah, I will finish this one in the live stream, so I'm thinking maybe 2 more, so Thursday and Tuesday. If not, I'll just finish it on Thursday. We'll see. But I will finish it in the live streams. Yes, Charles, hopefully by next week it'll be finished. And this is going to be more or less just a sketch, a portrait sketch. It's not going to be taken as far as some of my video paintings. So yes, definitely stay tuned. Oh, thank you, Ronald. Thanks, Tipu. Thanks, Barbara. Okay, so it looks like we don't have any more questions. So thank you so much for watching. Remember, I will be doing these streams every Tuesday and Thursday between 7:15 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Remember, if you want to take your online art education with me further, please check out my online classes on patreon.com/upartyartist, which is also listed for you in the description box of this video, also as the top pinned comment in the comment section of this video. Once again, thank you all so much. I wish you the very best in all of your artwork, and I'll see you on the next one.